You're watching BBC News. I'm Regid Ahmed. Our top stories. The battle to claim the last piece of territory held by Islamic State fighters stalls because thousands of civilians remain trapped inside. The US says it won't give up fighting IS.
The United States will continue to work with all our allies to hunt down the remnants of ISIS wherever and whenever they rear their ugly head.
US military planes carrying humanitarian aid for Venezuela begin arriving at the border. President Maduro calls it a cover for a US invasion. Mourners have been paying their respects to footballer Emiliano Sala in his hometown in Argentina. The striker died in a plane crash last month. Hello and welcome. The American Vice President Mike Pence says the Islamic State group in Iraq and Syria has been decimated. He was speaking after a commander with Kurdish forces fighting IS claimed that within a few days they'd be able to announce the end of the group's existence. Our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette is at the security conference in Munich where the US Vice President was speaking.
The caliphate has crumbled. Its last piece in this small Syrian town of Baghouz. And this, their last stand. These pictures are said to be filmed by Islamic State fighters, but they are under fire on all sides from Kurdish forces backed by American firepower.
The area that IS is still in is around 700 metres and they're surrounded. The delay to us storming the neighbourhood is due to the presence of civilians, who the terrorists use as human shields.
As local forces advance, frightened families flee. Amongst them are believed to be IS fighters on the run, a far cry from when they ran their cruel caliphate. Here in Munich, US Vice President Mike Pence tried to reassure allies. US troops are coming home, but America isn't leaving.
The United States will continue to work with all our allies to hunt down the remnants of ISIS wherever and whenever they rear their ugly head.
The end of the caliphate matters, but it's not the end of IS. Thousands of its fighters have already slipped back into Syrian and Iraqi society. They're again feeding on local grievances and already conducting attacks and assassinations. America's allies here and in the region worry about what's coming next. The caliphate has been a magnet for foreign fighters. That's over. But IS's extremist ideas still pose a powerful threat far beyond the region. Lise Doucette, BBC News, Munich.
US Air Force transport planes carrying humanitarian aid for Venezuela have landed at the Colombian border where food and medicine is being stockpiled for distribution. President Maduro has refused to allow the aid in, accusing the US of trying to organise a coup. US officials say the aid had been requested by the Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido, who declared himself interim president last month. John Ironmonger has the latest.
It is an operation that is both humanitarian and highly political. Arriving on the Colombian border, 3 US cargo planes carrying food, medicine and clothes for the people of Venezuela.
This is not the first shipment, nor will it be the last shipment, not only from the United States, but we know that many other countries are joining as well.
Aid packages are being stockpiled at the request of the Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido in Colombia, Brazil and the Caribbean. Speaking at a rally in Caracas, the self-proclaimed interim president appealed to new volunteers to help carry the supplies over crossings next Saturday, and he restated an ultimatum for the armed forces to back down.
Y de nuevo el mensaje a las Fuerzas Armadas de Venezuela.
Once again, the message to the Venezuelan armed forces. 7 days for humanitarian aid to enter. A week for you to do the right thing and to put yourselves on the side of the Constitution. We are authorising the entrance of not only humanitarian aid, but also humanity.
sino de la humanidad.
US officials say Venezuela is in the grip of an economic crisis, leading to widespread hunger and a critical shortage of basic medicines. According to the United Nations, 3 million Venezuelan migrants have fled the country since 2015. US aid drops are intensifying the standoff with Nicolas Maduro, who has called the operation disguise for an invasion. He continued this week to stoke up hostility among the armed forces, saying Yankee go home. Juan Guaidó said he would announce further details on Monday about his plan to get aid into the country, but it's a promise he could struggle to keep. Maduro's still loyal military have barricaded bridge crossings and show no signs of giving way. John Ironmonger, BBC News.
8 illegal miners have been rescued from 2 flooded mines in central Zimbabwe. At least 22 bodies have also been retrieved from the mines in the west of the capital, Harare. Authorities believe up to 70 people were trapped underground near the town of Kadoma when heavy rains flooded mine shafts on Tuesday night. The BBC's Zimbabwe correspondent Shingai Nyoka has the story.
No one expected there'd be survivors. Families, mostly wives with young children, had camped on site for days, watching, waiting, hoping. An unusual rescue operation unfolded here. Illegal miners working shoulder to shoulder with mining companies, police and soldiers. In the background, the constant buzz of pumps draining the shafts of water. As the days wore on, hope was fading.
We have never experienced such floods in this area, and it is so painful to lose our friends in such a way.
But then this. One by one, some miners were pulled out of the shafts. Muddy, exhausted, but thankfully alive. Their stories are harrowing. The lucky ones had found air pockets underground, but were neck deep in water. The grim task of retrieving the dead continues. Many bodies remain 40 meters below the ground. Trapped in a vast labyrinth of tunnels, the illegal miners had dug in their search for gold. Many of the dead are young men. The tragedy highlights the dangerous conditions under which small-scale miners here operate. The backbone of the gold economy, they produce more than 40% of the country's gold with little to no assistance. For now, the rescue operations continue, and the celebrations are intermixed with grief. The families hope the events of the last few days will force authorities to act to prevent future tragedies. Shingai Nyoka, BBC News.
The UK government says its main priority has to be the safety of the public when considering the case of a British teenager who left the country to join the Islamic State group in 2015. The family of Shamima Begum, who's now 19 and pregnant, say they'd welcome a police investigation into her actions, but want the government to help bring her home. Sophie Long reports.
This is the Al-Hal camp in northern Syria where the 19-year-old from East London is living as she awaits the birth of her 3rd child. Shamima Begum says both her son and daughter died, and she wants to come back to Britain so her unborn baby doesn't suffer the same fate. Her family, who had feared they would never see her again, have asked the government to help them get her home. But the Justice Secretary says there are risks to allowing people like Shamima Begum to return to Britain, and they would look at her case very closely.
What has to be the priority of the British government is ensuring the protection of the British people as a whole. We do have a number of powers in this area, we have to act within those powers, but we need to make sure that the British people are not put unnecessarily at risk.
In a statement, Shamima Begum's family said as a British citizen she has every expectation to be returned to the UK and be dealt with under the British justice system. Shamima's child, who will also be British, has every right, as a total innocent, to have the chance to grow up in the peace and security of this home. Shamima Begum's case is not unique. Some 850 people left the UK to join the so-called Islamic State. Around half have already come back. Some working against extremism say there needs to be more focus on what caused her to go to prevent others doing the same.
I realise that she is a bit of the poster girl of, of that phenomenon of those young girls going off to join Daesh. But if we take stock of what's happened, we need to see how did she get there and how can we stop other people from going down that route.
The Home Secretary has said that he won't hesitate to prevent supporters of terrorist organisations from returning to Britain. And if they do make it back, they will be questioned and potentially prosecuted. It is unclear what that will mean for Shamima Begum, who was just 15 when she left the UK for Syria. But if she is allowed to return home, she will have to answer for her actions. Sophie Long, BBC News, at the Home Office.
Now let's go back to the story of the battle to claim that last pocket of territory from the Islamic State group, which is being held up because of thousands of civilians remaining trapped there. Well, US-backed Kurdish forces launched an attack on IS's last remaining stronghold last week, and now they say victory is imminent. CBS correspondent Charlie Daggeter was there to send this report from the front line in Syria.
The final battle is in its final days, with ISIS pinned down to an area of around a quarter of a square mile. That's the update we got today from the commander of the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, Chia Farat. He said the final ISIS village of Bakus Vakani had not yet fallen, but his ground forces were holding fire and moving forward cautiously because so many civilians remain trapped as human shields. Military officials here say they severely underestimated the number of civilians inside that village when they launched the offensive to crush the last remnants of the so-called caliphate 1 week ago. First estimated to be around 1,500 people, more than twice that many have since flooded out this week, including many ISIS families. Hundreds of ISIS fighters reportedly surrendered this week, of the 450 or so militants who were thought to be making a last stand.
But there's no fighting in here.
And when we last visited the front line on Thursday, we found SDF fighters on a more relaxed footing since the final offensive began. Apart from sporadic gunfire, a relative calm suggested that the brutal last battle might be coming to an end. Today, Commander Farat vowed to broadcast to the world in the coming days the military end of ISIS. Now, he stressed military end because even U.S.-led coalition officials have said ISIS will remain a threat as an underground insurgency, which raises an important question about exactly when America's 2,000 troops will withdraw. Charlie Daggett, CBS News for BBC News in eastern Syria.
Donald Trump's choice to be the new US ambassador to the United Nations, Heather Nauert, has withdrawn her nomination. In a statement, Ms. Nauert said that she believes the decision is in the best interest for her family after what she described as a grueling 2 months. Ms. Nauert was due to replace Nikki Haley, who resigned from the position in October. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Still to come, international acclaim. We look back at the life of actor Bruno Ganz.
Nine years and 15,000 deaths after going into Afghanistan, the last Soviet troops were finally coming home. The withdrawal completed in good order, but the army defeated in the task it had been sent to perform.
Malcolm has been murdered. That has a terrible effect on the morale of the people. I'm terrified of the repercussions in the streets. One wonders who is next.
As the airlift got underway, there was no let-up in the eruption itself. Lava streams from a vent low in the crater flow down to the sea on the east of the island, away from the town for the time being. But it could start flowing again at any time.
The Russians heralded their new generation space station with a spectacular night launch. They've called it Mir, the Russian for peace.
This is BBC News, the latest headlines. The US Vice President says America will remain in the Middle East to help hunt down the remnants of so-called Islamic State, even after the militant's territory has been reclaimed. US military planes carrying aid for Venezuela began arriving at a Colombian border city where food and medicine is being stockpiled. Let's get more on that story now, the situation in Venezuela. From Caracas, we can speak to Dimitris Pantoulis, who's a Venezuela political analyst. Demetrius, is the aid on the border being used for political purposes, or is this a genuine desire to help those who need food and medicine in Venezuela?
I think first and foremost it is a political game, and it has a political goal, which is to show in the world that President Maduro doesn't care about the Venezuelan people, and also to show that Guaido, the interim president of Venezuela, cares more about the Venezuelan people and tries to give a solution to their problems. Also, I would like to stress that this decision to bring the aid through Colombia, it will be an ultimatum for the Venezuelan army if they will keep supporting President Maduro, or they will stay aside and leave the field open for a political transition.
Is there a problem, though, as more and more aid arrives, that President Maduro will have to save face and he'll just dig his heels in even more, as will the army?
Yeah, this is a very complicated issue. As we have seen that Guaido said that the Venezuelans, volunteers, they will go to Colombia and they will bring the aid in the Venezuelan soil. It is still, we don't have a clear plan what the actors will exactly do. But President Maduro now, it is under the global view. We'll have even a concert one day before the 23rd, which is the ultimatum that Guaido gave. So it is very unclear how all these actors will behave in the following days.
Is part of the problem that this aid is from the US government, rather than it being a charity, a non-political charity that's organising it?
President Maduro has denied that there exists a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela in the last 3 years. One factor, obviously, that affects more his decision not to accept the aid is that it's coming from the US. But we shouldn't forget, President Maduro doesn't consider that Venezuela has a humanitarian crisis. He doesn't even consider that we have economic crisis, while the GDP of the country has gone down like half of it in 3 years.
All right, Dimitris Pantoulis, a Venezuela political analyst in Caracas, thank you very much for your time. Well, the British-based FlyBMI airline has announced that it has ceased operations and is filing for administration. All flights have been cancelled with effect from Saturday. The airline operates 17 regional jet aircraft and covers routes to 25 European cities. The carrier had seen a dip in profits in recent months. Our business correspondent Rob Young reports.
FlyBMI no longer flying. It's cancelled all flights with immediate effect. The company is also filing for administration. The carrier flew more than 500,000 passengers last year. Its small jets operated on routes from Aberdeen, Bristol, Newcastle, East Midlands, Stansted and others to 25 European cities. Passengers who've been affected are anxious.
I'm in Belgium at the moment and I just got the BBC alert that FlyBMI have gone into administration. All the flights for me to return home are really expensive, and FlyBMI have said they won't return the £134 that I initially spent, so I don't know how I'm going to get back.
FlyBMI, based here at East Midlands Airport, says its collapse was unavoidable. It's blamed a spike in the price of fuel and changes in the cost of carbon permits. It said these had undermined efforts to turn a profit. A company statement said current trading and future prospects have also been seriously affected by the uncertainty created by the Brexit process, which has led to our inability to secure valuable flying contracts in Europe. Today's news was a surprise to passengers and staff, but the airline is just the latest carrier to get into difficulties.
We are now most of the way through what's been a miserable winter for a large number of airlines. We've seen failures including Germania, Small Planet, Cobalt of Cyprus, Primera Air of Iceland. All these small airlines have been collapsing, and I'm afraid FlyBMI has flown for the last time.
Passengers booked to travel with FlyBMI are being told not to go to the airport unless they've booked an alternative flight. With school holidays at the moment, the airline's collapse comes at an inconvenient time for many families.
Let's get some of the day's other news now. The deactivation of a Second World War bomb recently discovered in Paris could cause major disruption to Eurostar services on Sunday. 5 trains between London and the French capital have been cancelled. One will be diverted and others are expected to be delayed. The unexploded bomb was discovered during engineering work at the railway station served by Eurostar. Vandals in London have painted graffiti on the grave of the German revolutionary philosopher Karl Marx, the second attack on his memorial this month. Slogans including architect of genocide and terror and oppression were daubed in red paint on the 4-metre-high monument. A memorial service has taken place in Argentina for the football player Emiliano Sala, who died in a plane crash last month. The 28-year-old was killed 2 days after signing for Cardiff City when his plane came down in the English Channel. From Progreso, Natalio Cosoy reports.
Emiliano Sala's body leaves the grounds of his childhood football club, San Martín in Progreso, in central Argentina. His relatives, friends and neighbors came to say goodbye to the local hero at a private funeral.
He never forgot his roots, and that means people have a very fond memory of the kid, of Emiliano.
Sala spent his early years developing his football skills here. He left age 14 to pursue bigger opportunities. He was flying from France to Cardiff when his plane disappeared over the English Channel on January 21st. The Bluebirds had paid a club record of £15 million for the player's transfer from Ligue 1 Nantes. 2 weeks later, the wreckage was found, and shortly afterwards, Sala's body was recovered. The pilot, David Ibbotson, is still missing. Representatives from his new club travelled to Argentina for today's service.
People say, well, he's never played for you, but he was my player, and the feelings I had, I chased him, wanted him, and he said to me, I will get you the goals that keep you up in the Premier League, and I said, I know you will.
The whole club feels very sad, and Cardiff, as general, feel very sad of the incident. And today I think it's good for the family to have some closure.
No cameras were allowed inside the building where the funeral took place. The mourners sat in front of Emiliano Sala's coffin. They were silent, some of them were praying. The coffin was surrounded by wreaths, and there was a banner that read, "Your legacy will be eternal." Ahead of today's service, Sala's boyhood club, San Martín de Progreso, posted a message on social media saying, "We are waiting for you, like the first day you left, but this time to stay with us forever, eternally in our hearts." Natalio Cosoy, BBC News, Progreso.
Bruno Ganz, the Swiss actor most famous for playing Hitler in the film Downfall, has died at the age of 77. It's believed he'd been suffering from cancer. The BBC's Tim Allman looks back at his life and career.
I can't see you, but I know you're here.
He was nothing if not versatile, though, here playing an angel who chooses to become mortal in Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire. This time he was displaying sensitivity, vulnerability and compassion. Tributes were soon paid to the Swiss actor. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas tweeted, "One of the most important actors of our time goes. His brilliant work remains." American filmmaker Kevin Smith said, "Your performance in Downfall was legendary. Your vast career was enviable." And the organisers of the Berlin Film Festival tweeted, "He was an outstanding figure of international film history." Bruno Ganz was born in 1941 and grew up in Zurich. He decided to become an actor when a friendly lighting technician showed him around a local theatre. He worked both on the stage and the silver screen in Hollywood and in Europe. An actor of nuance, of warmth and humanity. And at Germany's most prestigious awards ceremony, a standing ovation for Bruno Ganz, who, as the host put it, is once more in the sky above Berlin.
Bruno Ganz, who's died at the age of 77. Stay with BBC News.